"You're fired, Monica." The words hit the room like a lightning strike. For one long second, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then the silence shattered into scattered applause. Inside the glass-walled auditorium of Ellison Dynamics Group's headquarters in downtown Chicago, more than 300 executives, managers, and department heads stared toward the stage in disbelief. At the center of it all sat Monica Ellison, 47 years old, black, self-made, founder of the company, and according to the white chairman standing behind the podium, no longer its CEO. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Monica Ellison. The chairman, Richard Hawthorne, adjusted his navy suit and smiled as if he had just completed a routine business announcement. Behind him, a giant screen displayed the company logo beside the words Leadership Transition Meeting. The phrase looked polished, professional, carefully prepared. Monica noticed that immediately. This had been planned long before she entered the room. Several executives in the front rows exchanged satisfied glances. A few even nodded to one another. One woman began clapping harder than everyone else. Another executive leaned back in his chair and smirked. They looked relieved, victorious, like people celebrating the end of a long campaign. Monica remained seated. Her expression never changed. Her hands rested calmly on the conference table. No anger, no panic, no argument. That unsettled them more than any protest could have. Richard cleared his throat. Effective immediately, the board has voted to remove Monica Ellison from her position as Chief Executive Officer. More applause followed. Louder this time. Across the room, some employees looked confused. Others stared at Monica, waiting for a reaction. None came. The air felt charged. Not because Monica looked defeated. Because she didn't. She sat as if she already knew something nobody else did. In the back row, a young corporate attorney named Angela Morris frowned. She had joined the company only 8 months earlier. During the past week, she had reviewed documents connected to the board vote. Something about them never felt right. The numbers matched. The signatures appeared valid. Yet every instinct told her a larger story was hiding beneath the surface. Now, watching Richard speak, that feeling returned stronger than ever. "We thank Monica for her years of service," Richard continued. Years of service. The phrase hung in the air like an insult. Monica had not merely served the company. She had built it. 26 years earlier, she started Ellison Dynamics from a rented garage with a single folding table, 2 used computers, and a dream nobody believed in. Yet here she sat while people who arrived decades later acted as if they were dismissing an employee. Richard glanced toward her. "Security will assist Ms. Ellison with the transition process after the meeting." Several executives smiled. One even laughed quietly. Monica finally lifted her eyes. Not toward Richard. Not toward the board. Toward the giant digital clock mounted on the far wall. Then she looked back at the stage. Calm, patient, unshaken, as if the real meeting had not started yet. The digital clock continued its silent countdown above the stage while the room struggled to understand the woman sitting at the center of the storm. Monica Ellison did not look like someone who had just lost everything. That was the first thing Angela Morris noticed. Most executives would have argued. Some would have demanded explanations. Others would have walked out. Monica did none of those things. She simply watched. Richard Hawthorne mistook that calm for surrender. So did the executives seated behind him. They saw a woman sitting alone. They did not see the 26 years that had brought her there. They did not see the 16-hour workdays. They did not see the winter nights in Detroit when the heat barely worked inside the apartment she shared with her mother. They did not see the young black woman carrying business proposals from office to office while people smiled politely and told her no. Monica remembered all of it. At 23, she had walked into a meeting with 3 investors. One of them spent the first 10 minutes assuming she was an assistant. Another asked whether someone else would be presenting the business plan. When Monica explained that she was the founder, the room became quiet. The kind of quiet she had learned to recognize. The kind that arrived when expectations collided with reality. She had seen that look hundreds of times. In conference rooms. In banks. At networking events. People looked at her skin color before they looked at her accomplishments. They looked at her appearance before they looked at her results. Yet every rejection became fuel. Every closed door became motivation. She built Ellison Dynamics one contract at a time, one client at a time, one impossible quarter at a time. 5 years became 10. 10 became 20. The company expanded from a small consulting operation into a technology powerhouse with offices across the country. Revenue climbed into the billions. Industry magazines featured her on their covers. Universities invited her to speak. Business leaders sought her advice. The same world that once questioned her ability to lead now studied her success. Yet success created a different problem. As the company grew, so did the ambitions of people around her. Some admired her. Others envied her. A few quietly waited for an opportunity to take control. Richard Hawthorne belonged to that last group. 3 years earlier, Monica had personally approved his appointment as chairman. She believed his experience would strengthen the company. Instead, he spent those years building alliances inside the executive ranks. Private dinners, closed-door conversations, carefully selected meetings, small moves that seemed harmless on their own. Together, they formed something much larger. Monica understood that now. Across the auditorium, several senior executives continued whispering among themselves. They looked relaxed, almost celebratory. One man checked his phone and smiled. Another leaned toward a colleague and quietly said, "It is finally over." Monica heard him. She heard all of it. Yet her expression never changed. Angela noticed that too. The attorney opened her tablet again and reviewed a document she had saved earlier that morning. A detail buried inside the paperwork continued bothering her. One signature, one clause, one line that did not fit the story everyone else seemed eager to believe. On stage, Richard adjusted the microphone and prepared to continue. He thought the hardest part was finished. He thought Monica Ellison had already lost. But as Monica glanced once more at the clock on the wall, a faint smile almost appeared. Almost. Then it vanished. And for the first time that morning, she looked completely in control. Richard Hawthorne smiled as though the outcome had been inevitable. The confidence in his face came from months of preparation. Months of private conversations that never appeared on company calendars. Months of carefully selected meetings held behind closed doors. He believed he had built something impossible to stop. Across the auditorium, the senior leadership team shared that confidence. They had rehearsed this moment in their minds so many times that it already felt like history. Monica Ellison watched them quietly. She knew most of the faces. She had hired many of them herself. Some had started as junior managers. Others arrived from competing firms looking for opportunity. She gave them resources. She gave them trust. She gave them careers. Now many of those same people sat comfortably in their seats, convinced they had outmaneuvered the woman who built the company. Richard tapped a folder resting on the podium. "The board acted in the best interests of the organization," he said. The phrase sounded polished. Legal. Safe. Yet Monica noticed several executives avoiding eye contact. Not everyone looked comfortable. Some looked nervous. Others looked relieved. A few looked terrified. That told her everything she needed to know. People rarely fear the truth when they believe they are standing on it. Angela Morris studied the room from the back row. During the previous week, she had reviewed dozens of documents related to the board vote. Most appeared legitimate. Financial summaries, governance reports, performance assessments. But one pattern continued bothering her. Every report supporting Monica's removal had originated from the same small group of executives. The same names appeared again and again. Richard Hawthorne, Chief Financial Officer Stephen Keller, Chief Operating Officer Linda Brooks, Executive Vice President Mark Dalton. Different documents, different signatures, same circle. The realization sat heavily in her mind. This had never been about performance. It had been about control. 3 months earlier, Stephen Keller quietly presented projections suggesting leadership instability. 6 weeks later, Linda Brooks introduced concerns about strategic direction. Then Mark Dalton distributed recommendations for executive restructuring. Separately, each action seemed ordinary. Together, they formed a roadmap leading directly to this moment. Monica understood exactly how the pieces fit together. She had watched the pattern emerge for months. Not because they hid it well, because ambition always leaves fingerprints. Richard continued speaking while a presentation appeared on the giant screen behind him. Charts, numbers, corporate language, carefully arranged evidence designed to justify a conclusion already chosen in advance. Several executives nodded as though they were witnessing an objective review. Monica noticed something else. Nobody on stage mentioned ownership. Nobody mentioned voting rights. Nobody mentioned a particular amendment added to the company's governing structure years ago. The omission was not accidental. It was the foundation of their entire strategy. Angela opened the document on her tablet again. Her eyes stopped on the same clause that had troubled her all morning. One paragraph buried deep within company records. One paragraph that appeared almost invisible unless someone knew exactly where to look. Her heartbeat quickened. Suddenly, the missing piece became clear. Across the room, Richard finished another prepared statement and accepted a round of polite applause. He thought he was delivering the final chapter. He thought Monica's story inside the company had ended. Yet as Angela looked from her screen to Monica Ellison, she saw something nobody else seemed to notice. Monica was not listening like a defeated executive. She was listening like a woman, waiting for a clock to reach a specific moment. Angela Morris stared at the clause on her screen and felt the room shift around her. Not physically, emotionally, like a puzzle finally revealing its missing piece. The auditorium remained focused on Richard Hawthorne and his presentation, but Angela no longer heard most of what he was saying. Her attention was locked onto a paragraph buried deep inside the corporate governance records of Ellison Dynamics. One paragraph. 4 sentences. Less than 100 words. Yet those words carried more weight than every speech being delivered from the stage. Angela checked the document again. Then a third time. The language was clear, precise, legally airtight. She felt her pulse quicken. Across the auditorium, Richard continued explaining why the company needed new leadership. Several executives nodded in agreement. Others appeared eager to move on to the next phase. They were already acting like owners of a future that had not happened yet. Some checked messages on their phones. Some exchanged confident smiles. One executive quietly whispered, "This company can finally move forward." Monica heard him. She heard everything. Yet she remained perfectly still. Angela glanced toward Monica and noticed something unusual. The former chief executive was not reviewing notes. She was not making calls. She was not defending herself. She was simply watching the room. Watching people reveal themselves. Watching ambitions speak louder than loyalty. Watching years of hidden resentment finally step into daylight. Angela remembered her first meeting with Monica 8 months earlier. She had expected a billionaire founder with an intimidating personality. Instead, she met a woman who spent 20 minutes asking about her family, her goals, and her career ambitions. Monica knew the names of interns. She remembered birthdays. She answered emails herself when she did not have to. The contrast between that memory and the current scene felt impossible to ignore. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. Angela opened another document connected to the board vote. Then another. The same names appeared again. Richard Hawthorne, Stephen Keller, Linda Brooks, Mark Dalton. The circle remained identical. Every road led back to them. Every recommendation. Every accusation. Every justification. It was not a leadership transition. It was a coordinated takeover. Suddenly, Angela noticed another detail. The governing amendment had never been repealed. It had never been modified. It had never even been challenged. Which meant it was still active, still enforceable, still powerful. Her eyes widened. She looked toward the giant clock mounted on the wall, then toward Monica. For the first time all morning, Monica looked directly back at her. Neither woman spoke. They did not need to. Angela saw complete certainty in Monica's eyes. Not hope, not confidence. Certainty. The kind possessed by someone who already knew how the story ended. On stage, Richard finished another slide and accepted more applause. "Today marks a new era for Ellison Dynamics," he declared proudly. Several executives clapped immediately. Others followed. The sound echoed through the auditorium. Yet beneath the applause, tension was growing. Employees seated farther back looked uncomfortable. Department managers exchanged worried glances. The atmosphere no longer felt victorious. It felt unstable, as though everyone was standing on a bridge without realizing the foundation beneath them was shifting. Angela slowly closed her tablet. She finally understood why Monica had never argued. Why she never defended herself. Why she kept looking at the clock. Because Monica was not waiting for permission to respond. She was waiting for something else. Something already in motion. Something the people celebrating on stage had completely failed to see. The applause finally faded, leaving behind a strange silence that felt heavier than the noise itself. Richard Hawthorne glanced toward the side entrance of the auditorium and gave a subtle nod. Moments later, two members of the corporate facilities team appeared near the stage. They were not security officers. They were simply employees following instructions they believed were legitimate. Yet their presence sent a message everyone understood. The transition was moving forward. Richard straightened his jacket and smiled. Toward the audience. In order to ensure a smooth leadership change, company property will now be collected. Several executives nodded approvingly. One even folded his arms with visible satisfaction. Across the room, dozens of employees shifted uncomfortably in their seats. What had started as a leadership announcement was beginning to feel personal. Monica Ellison remained seated, calm, silent, watching. One facilities manager approached carefully. "Ma'am, we have been asked to collect your executive access badge and company devices." His voice carried none of the arrogance displayed by the executives on stage. If anything, he looked embarrassed. Monica looked up at him and offered a small nod. "You are doing your job," she said quietly. "I understand." The man looked relieved. Around the auditorium, whispers spread through the crowd. Employees exchanged uncertain glances. Some looked away entirely. Others stared at Monica with growing sympathy. For many of them, she was not simply a chief executive. She was the reason they had careers, the reason they had opportunities, the reason the company existed at all. Yet now they were watching her being treated like an outsider inside the organization she had built from nothing. The contrast felt impossible to ignore. As Monica unclipped her badge and placed it on the table, an old memory surfaced. 24 years earlier, she had stood inside a high-rise office building in Detroit, carrying a business proposal she spent 6 months preparing. The conference room overlooked the city skyline. 3 investors sat across from her. Before she could finish her presentation, one of them interrupted. "You seem intelligent," he said. "But companies of this size require a different kind of leadership." Monica remembered exactly how the room felt, exactly how the silence sounded, exactly what he meant, even though he never said it directly. She remembered leaving the building that day with tears she refused to let anyone see. She remembered standing beside her car in a parking garage and making a promise to herself. One day, nobody would be able to decide whether she belonged in a room. She would own the room. The memory faded. The auditorium returned. Richard was speaking again. "The future of this company requires stability." Stability. Another polished corporate word. Another carefully chosen phrase. Monica almost smiled. Stability was being used by people who had spent months creating chaos behind closed doors. Angela Morris watched everything unfold from the back row. The more she observed, the more convinced she became that the executives on stage had made a catastrophic mistake. Not because they underestimated Monica's intelligence, not because they underestimated her experience, because they underestimated her preparation. Monica placed her company phone beside the badge. Then she looked toward the digital clock once again. 47 seconds had passed since the facilities team entered the room. 47 seconds closer to whatever she was waiting for. Across the stage, Richard mistook her composure for defeat. He had no idea that every second moving forward was bringing him closer to the worst moment of his professional life. The digital clock reached another minute, and the atmosphere inside the auditorium continued to tighten. Nobody seemed comfortable anymore. The celebration that had filled the room earlier was fading beneath a growing sense of uncertainty. Even the executives who had applauded the loudest now appeared restless. Richard Hawthorne noticed it too. He tried to regain control by continuing his remarks, but the confidence in his voice was beginning to sound rehearsed. Across the room, Monica Ellison remained seated with the same calm expression she had worn since the meeting began. Her badge was gone. Her company phone rested on the table. By every visible measure, she looked like someone who had accepted defeat. That illusion was exactly what made her so dangerous. Angela Morris watched the clock. Then she watched Monica. Then she looked back at the clause stored on her tablet. The realization still echoed through her mind. Monica had never been waiting for a chance to defend herself. She had been waiting for timing. Precise timing. The kind that transforms a room in seconds. On stage, Richard finished another statement about accountability and governance. Several executives nodded automatically. Others stared down at their screens. The energy had changed. Employees throughout the auditorium were no longer paying attention to the presentation. They were paying attention to Monica. People kept looking toward her as if they expected something to happen. Deep down, many of them did. Monica slowly folded her hands together and glanced at the clock again. 20 seconds. That was all. 20 seconds until a sequence already set in motion reached its destination. Months earlier, when the first signs of betrayal appeared, Monica had not reacted emotionally. She had reacted strategically. While others built alliances, she gathered information. While others whispered behind closed doors, she documented everything. Every unusual meeting. Every suspicious recommendation. Every attempt to concentrate authority within a small circle of executives. She never interrupted them. She never warned them. She simply prepared. Back in the present, Richard took a sip of water and looked toward the audience. This company now enters a new chapter, he declared. A few executives clapped politely. The applause sounded weak. Forced. Then something happened. A vibration echoed through the room. One phone. Then another. Then another. Dozens of executives suddenly looked down at their screens. Confusion spread across their faces. The interruptions multiplied. Notification after notification appeared simultaneously across the leadership team. Stephen Keller checked his device and frowned. Linda Brooks looked at her screen twice as if she thought she had read it incorrectly. Mark Dalton's expression changed completely. The room began to buzz with whispers. Richard stopped speaking. "Is there a problem?" he asked. Nobody answered immediately. Monica finally moved. Not dramatically. Not quickly. She simply stood. The motion alone silenced the auditorium. Hundreds of eyes followed her. Richard stared across the stage. For the first time that morning, uncertainty appeared in his face. Monica looked toward him, then toward the giant screen behind the podium. A faint tone echoed through the auditorium speakers. The presentation disappeared. The company logo vanished. The screen turned black. A collective gasp moved through the audience. Nobody understood what was happening. Monica did. Angela did. And suddenly, every executive who had celebrated moments earlier looked as though the floor beneath them had begun to shift. The black screen held for 3 seconds. 3 long seconds that felt like an hour inside the auditorium. Then white text appeared across the giant display. Corporate Governance Amendment 14. The room fell completely silent. Richard Hawthorne turned toward the screen. The confidence that had carried him through the morning began to disappear. Around him, executives stared upward in confusion. Some immediately reached for their phones. Others looked toward the technical staff positioned near the rear exits. Nobody moved. Nobody seemed to know how the document had appeared. Monica Ellison stood quietly near her chair. Calm. Unhurried. In complete control. The words continued scrolling across the display. Every employee in the auditorium could see them. Every manager. Every executive. Every member of the live stream audience watching from offices across the country. Angela Morris did not need to read the amendment again. She already knew what it said. Yet hearing the legal language displayed publicly felt different. More powerful. More final. Richard stepped toward the podium. "Turn that off," he demanded. Nothing happened. The screen remained unchanged. Then another line appeared. Founders' Protective Authority remains active. Several executives exchanged alarmed glances. Stephen Keller's face turned pale. Linda Brooks lowered her phone and stared at the display without blinking. Mark Dalton looked as though he had forgotten how to breathe. Monica finally took a step forward. The sound of her shoes crossing the stage seemed louder than Richard's microphone. Every eye followed her. "You spent months reviewing financial reports," she said calmly. "You reviewed performance audits. You reviewed governance documents. You reviewed voting procedures." Her voice was steady, controlled, but somehow none of you reviewed the one amendment that actually mattered. Nobody interrupted. Nobody dared. The screen changed again. A highlighted section appeared. Special Founder Authority. Permanent Voting Control. Executive Removal Rights. Board Override Authority. Audible gasps spread through the auditorium. Employees looked at one another in disbelief. Richard stared at the language as though seeing it for the first time. Because he was. Monica looked directly at him. "You removed a title," she said. "You never removed ownership." The sentence landed like a hammer. Across the room, hundreds of employees sat frozen. Angela noticed several executives checking their phones again. More notifications were arriving. More alerts. More warnings. Their confidence was evaporating in real time. Richard finally found his voice. "This cannot be correct." Monica almost smiled. "It is exactly correct." She turned toward the audience. 26 years ago, I built this company from a rented garage. During every funding round, every expansion, every restructuring, I protected one thing. She pointed toward the screen. The future of this company from people who would mistake power for entitlement. Nobody applauded. Nobody spoke. The room was too shocked. Monica continued. You called this a leadership transition. She looked toward the executives seated behind Richard. It was never a transition. It was an attempted takeover. Several employees lowered their heads. Others stared openly at the leadership team. The mood inside the auditorium had completely reversed. An hour earlier, Monica had appeared isolated. Now she looked unshakable. Richard looked trapped. The giant screen displayed one final line. Founder authority verified. Status active. Monica turned toward the executives one last time. You thought you were ending my story today, she said quietly. What you actually did was activate the clause that allows me to end yours. The silence that followed felt almost unreal. Hundreds of employees sat frozen as the truth settled over the auditorium. The people who had walked into the meeting expecting to witness the end of Monica Ellison's leadership were now watching the collapse of an entirely different plan. Richard Hawthorne stood motionless beside the podium. The authority he carried earlier had vanished. Around him, members of the executive team stared at their phones as new notifications continued arriving. One after another. Relentless. Unavoidable. Stephen Keller suddenly stood from his chair. There has to be some mistake, he said. His voice lacked the confidence it once carried. Monica looked at him calmly. There is no mistake. Almost immediately another alert appeared on his screen. His expression changed. The color drained from his face. Across the stage, Linda Brooks checked her company tablet. Her access portal would not load. She tried again. Then again. Nothing. Mark Dalton attempted to open internal reports. Every request returned the same message. Access denied. The audience began whispering. Employees exchanged stunned looks. Managers leaned toward one another, trying to understand what was happening. Monica did not raise her voice. She did not celebrate. She simply stood beside the table while events unfolded exactly as planned. The giant screen behind her changed once again. A new document appeared. Executive Action Authorization. Beneath it was a list of names. Richard Hawthorne, Stephen Keller, Linda Brooks, Mark Dalton. Several others followed. The same group that had spent months organizing against her. The same group that believed they had secured control of the company. Gasps echoed across the auditorium. Then another tone sounded through the speaker system. A calm voice filled the room. Executive access credentials have been suspended pending governance review. The message was brief, professional, final. Richard stepped toward the microphone. You cannot do this without board approval. Monica met his eyes. I already did. The room became silent again. Angela Morris watched from the back row as the reality of the situation spread through the audience. People were no longer confused. They understood. The leadership team had spent months building a strategy around authority they never truly possessed. Monica had allowed them to reveal every step publicly. Now the consequences were arriving all at once. Another notification appeared across executive devices. Corporate email access suspended. Additional notifications followed. Administrative permissions removed. Executive controls disabled. Employees throughout the auditorium could see the reactions happening in real time. The executives who had applauded earlier now looked shocked. Some appeared embarrassed. Others looked completely lost. Monica remained composed. The contrast could not have been sharper. 26 years of discipline stood against months of arrogance. 26 years of sacrifice stood against ambition disguised as entitlement. Richard lowered his phone slowly. For the first time all morning, he seemed to understand the full scope of what had happened. This meeting had never been Monica's downfall. It had become evidence. Every statement, every vote, every public attempt to remove her. Recorded, documented, verified. Monica looked toward the audience. Then toward the live stream camera broadcasting the event to thousands of employees nationwide. Leadership is not about taking power, she said quietly. It is about proving you deserve it. Nobody interrupted. Nobody laughed. Nobody applauded. Not yet. The room was still processing the reversal. On stage, the executives who thought they controlled the future were discovering that their authority had disappeared in a matter of minutes. And as the giant screen displayed the final status update confirming the governance actions, Everyone in the auditorium understood the same thing. Monica Ellison had never been fighting to keep her position. She had been waiting for the right moment to reveal who truly held it. For several seconds, nobody moved. The auditorium sat suspended between shock and understanding. Then slowly, almost reluctantly, reality settled over the room. The giant screen displayed the completed governance authorization, while employees stared at the stage where power had changed hands without a single raised voice. Richard Hawthorne lowered his gaze. Stephen Keller sat back in his chair. Linda Brooks looked toward the floor. The confidence that had filled the room at the beginning of the meeting was gone. In its place stood something else. Consequence. Monica Ellison remained at the center of it all. Calm, composed, unshaken. The same woman they had tried to remove now stood as the only person who had understood exactly where the day was headed. Across the auditorium, employees began exchanging looks. Some nodded quietly. Others smiled for the first time all morning. Many had spent years watching Monica build opportunities inside the company. They remembered scholarships she funded, mentorship programs she created, promotions she supported. They remembered a leader who knew names instead of employee numbers. A leader who walked through offices and stopped to ask people about their families. The contrast between that leadership and what they had witnessed from the executive team could not have been clearer. Angela Morris looked around the room and saw something remarkable. People were not reacting to power. They were reacting to character. That was the difference. Power can impress people. Character earns their trust. Monica stepped toward the podium. No security escorts. No dramatic speeches. No celebration. Just a woman who had spent 26 years building something worth protecting. The room became silent again. Thousands of employees watching through the company live stream waited for her to speak. Monica rested her hands lightly on the podium and looked across the audience. I could spend the next hour talking about what happened here today, she said. I could talk about ambition. I could talk about betrayal. I could talk about decisions that disappointed me. She paused. The room remained completely still. But that would not help this company move forward. Several employees nodded. Monica continued. A title does not make someone a leader. A corner office does not make someone a leader. Authority does not make someone a leader. Her voice remained steady. Leadership is what you do when nobody is watching. Leadership is how you treat people when they cannot give you anything in return. Leadership is whether your actions match your values. The words settled over the auditorium. Simple, direct, impossible to ignore. Monica glanced briefly toward the executives who had attempted to remove her. Then she looked back at the employees. This company was never built on fear. It was never built on ego. It was never built on exclusion. It was built on opportunity. A few people began applauding. Then more joined them. The sound spread row by row until the entire auditorium rose to its feet. Monica did not acknowledge the applause immediately. She simply stood there, allowing the moment to belong to everyone who had helped build the company alongside her. Finally, she offered a small smile. The same calm smile she had carried throughout the entire day. I did not raise my voice today, she said. I raised the standard. The applause grew louder. Employees stood taller. The future that seemed uncertain only an hour earlier suddenly felt clear again. And as the cameras continued broadcasting across every office, conference room, and workspace in the company, one truth remained undeniable. They had tried to remove the founder. Instead, they reminded everyone why she belonged there in the first place.